um like when it comes to living your like best standard, like I think people forget so much of the time that it takes to get there, right? Of you start the process, right? The guy that's overweight who's trying to get there, and then of anything else, right? Like of shooting, hunting, living off the land, farming, right? That takes so many reps to do. And then in business, the thing that think people forget is like this is a lifetime game and they want to get there so fast. Like, and I'm not like out of that group of people, right? Like you want to get there so fast, but you have to do it in a way that'll keep you in the game. So like everybody wants to do it on leverage or how do I get there faster or all these other things, not with the resources that you have. They want to borrow money, they want to get in debt, they want to, bring on partners, they want somebody else to come in and save the day. And they don't understand that like it is you, right? You have to save your own day. And there is some, mechanisms for funding and cash flow and like all that, so long as the buckets are filled in your or the holes are filled in your bucket. But like I've seen even in my short period of like really paying attention to people, like people go out of business for not having like a solid game plan, or they did so much shit on leverage that then they collapsed and they're never going to recover from it. So like how can you do things to keep you in the game forever? Right. And like that is, it's like the old Warren Buffett quote of like your reputation takes a lifetime to build and a moment to destroy. And so many people live their life on like that type of crutch of like they're doing it in the moment, not on like a reputation basis. Right. Like, and they don't think about the ramifications of that.
It's absolutely correct, man. I mean, there is no one coming to save us, right? Whether it's in politics or in business, in family life, you have to commit to being excellent yourself and to solving it yourself. And you mentioned doing the reps and putting in the time. Like, I agree that there are some circumstances, some instances where yes, you could probably borrow a shit ton of cash or get some infusion that can push you to the next level where you have a better chance of succeeding. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of those people who do that, they wake up at that next level not knowing how to operate because they didn't have to grind it out. They didn't have to do all the step by step process to learn how the hell to get there. Right. I just started reading the E-Myth Revisited, and I know it's a age old entrepreneurial book and I've never read it until now, but it's the story of the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. And if you don't yourself or your tight knit group work through those mindsets or those personalities and just kind of bypass that by a bunch of money falling in your lap, I don't know how you really have set yourself up to succeed. And I think you're setting yourself up even more so for utter failure down the road because you haven't taken those lumps, you haven't been punched in the face, you haven't learned to live it. You just kind of advance past that whole stage with an infusion of money. And I don't know. That's how I look at it.
Well, people don't value the skill set, right? That's really what it comes down to is if you think of it in terms of like, if you went to zero, could you do it again with nothing? And that takes skills. And that's the difference. And so what you see in like these cash infusions or these entrepreneurs that like made it, had an exit, whatever, is most of them can't do it again because they don't have the skills, right?
Sure.
You look at even in our industry, like a PlanGrid, right? And the people that founded it, like they didn't really have the skills, right? They got cash infusion, so then they hired salespeople. They didn't learn to sell. Like yeah, her husband, coded the first thing, and she had the idea for it, saw well and good, and then sold it well enough to get the money for it. But like, could she do it again? And I think my answer is like no, because she's going and sitting on boards of private equity. Like she's not a true like entrepreneurs can't not do this, right? And the question becomes like, and two, like I've been thinking about this and I get asked it, on occasion is like, am I ever going to sell? And the question then begs like, what would you do next? And so a true entrepreneur, like really in their cell, they have another mission, they have another purpose, they have something that's like setting them up. And then the question too in the beginning of a company is like, are you building this to sell or are you building it to run? One, you care about money. Two, you care about the purpose and helping people. And those are two very different things. I don't think enough people ask that question up front. And like, are you doing this just for money, or are you doing it as, you know, a lifestyle, a way to live, a problem you really want to solve? And those are two very drastic questions than I think most people ever ask themselves.
Hugely, hugely different, right? I mean, they're just completely polar opposite paths to take. One, you know, on the money side and the building a business just to sell it, those are the guys that are, you know, 20-year-old quote unquote millionaires flexing on an Instagram with a rented Lamborghini, versus the other path that I'm going down, that, you know, we're on different sides of the table, and obviously, but I may be crusty and old before I even get to the point where I'm even thinking of selling the construction company. However, I know along the way I'm going to boost up so many lives and improve, you know, the value that we bring to the market and the value we bring to our specialty contractor community. And there's so much more intrinsic benefit. And believe me, I want the fucking money too, right? But I don't need the money right now today, so I can just bounce out of here and go do something different. I'm highly confident that if the walls come crashing down at the construction company, that yeah, I could go most anywhere and start from zero again. I know I can. I don't really want to, but I can sleep at night knowing that. It's like we started off with. It's like hunting and shooting guns, right? I know if the shit really falls apart and the zombie apocalypse comes on and, you know, it's Walking Dead, I can go kill a deer and grow a garden and protect my family and keep moving on. And much in that same way, I know I can start another business. I know I can go and build another construction firm or whatever, but it's a totally different mindset, and it's a totally different way of proceeding down the path of life every day in your day-to-day actions at your company, whatever it is you're doing.
It was like a bandwidth issue, right? Like, can you can you increase skills? Like you see all these people like that are, I mean, they're going real broke real fast because they put all their money in like crypto and like it went to zero. And like this is what people, you know, they invest in what they think is a asset, but it can go away. Right. If it can go away overnight, it's not an asset, it is a liability. And so like just like your house is not truly an asset until you've paid it all off, right? Until you have no mortgage, it is not an asset, it is a liability because you still have a
Right.
monthly payment. And so like that nuance, right? Like in me learning to like write copy and market and run ads and all that kind of stuff, or write software or design a building, like that is an asset, right? I can take that somewhere and make money with it, right? Your ability to put estimates together and schedules and bring a team together and put a building up, that is a that is an asset, that is a skill, that is something that like took time, effort, energy, but that you can sell into the marketplace. And when you really look at like if you just do like simple assets and liabilities, those two things become very apparent when you start to like go down that path. And this is like the question that over the last 3 years I've significantly asked myself, right? Like of what is an actual skill, right? Like what is something that I'm going to get better and have no matter what on the other side of this? You know, like when COVID hit, like I just learned to program and then I spent a ton of time doing it. And like, yeah, I can pretty much only really code for myself and my own program, but I couldn't necessarily, I could go and add on to other stuff. And I'm like a basic level programmer from that context. Like I can do my own thing and I can read through other people's code well enough to like get through. But it was a skill to get me through my business, right? And then figure out when people are bullshitting me. So that becomes a skill. Like writing, I can take anywhere, you know, speaking, take anywhere, content, take anywhere. Like what other things can you stack on the other side of that that you can transfer, even if it's to another business in your same industry, right? Like understanding deeply how like codes are written, how things work, or the finances of an A&E firm. Like, okay, great. I can take that. Yes, I'm helping all the firms today, but I can take that to any individual firm, and that's a skill and a valuable asset to them. And And I think like when you really look at assets and liabilities and what is something you have to continue to put money into, that is a liability, right? Something that can pay you back, that is an asset. And like that fundamental difference between assets and liabilities, just on that from a skill set standpoint, from your finances, from your home life, from all of that, that is a very different way to look at things that I think, you know, people misconstrue like greatly.
For sure, man. And you know, you talk about assets, it's a hard concept, I think, for some people to understand, right? Because the assets you're talking about, the ability to code, the ability to sell, strategic planning, all these things, they don't necessarily have a dollar sign value attached to it, right? So it's not like the Lamborghini you own that is worth X number of dollars. But the potential is limitless to these type of assets, these kind of almost like personality assets. I'm sure there's a better term than that, but
Goodwill is what that is on a balance sheet.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so it's goodwill, but how to take those skills, those assets now, and turn them into something that can appreciate in value over time immensely, versus the guy who came up with a widget and borrowed $10 million to produce widgets and sells it real fast and then sells the business and exits. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I don't want to shit all over the guys that build businesses and exit them. That's a lofty goal for all of us, I think, to shoot for at some point. But it's just a different type of business. It's a different type of asset class, and it just takes a different personality.
You have to know what you're in it for, right? Like I've met a few well, one in particular, but like I've met some corporate raiders over the years, right? Guys that go buy businesses, fix them, flip them. And that's dude, you can make a lot of money doing that, but that is a skill, right? That is an asset that they have, that the ability to go into companies, fix them, right? Generate sales and then flip them on the other side of it. So like there's nothing wrong with any of that. But those guys have acquired so many skills. They're usually older guys that can then go in and do all this stuff. And I think that you have to know what your purpose is going into whatever it is that you're doing. And that's the question that people haven't answered, right? Am I in this for the money or am I in this for the cause? Those are two very different questions that'll lead you to two very different places. And I think it's just being honest with yourself, right? Like I built Cowabunga initially to like solve my own issue, right? Like, and I thought I was going to make a bunch of money. And then it's turned into like, and I really don't want anybody else in the industry to have to suffer the way that I did, right? And that's across all of it, like I I heard a story this weekend of a guy that one of the one of our brothers in Arte, he's a home builder, custom home builder, and he went into this guy after the 0809 recession, was building homes, had a ton of money tied up in stuff, owed a ton of taxes, and then in I don't know the year, but how the story went is, one day he went into his office, his friend in the area, and his assistant came out just screaming. Dude committed suicide in his office because of how much money he owed and didn't know a way out and anything like that. And so like my purpose has changed from just my own selfish reasons of like I'm going to make money and this thing's going to be great and we're going to help a lot of people. It's still that, but also like like we talk about in here is like suicide rates in construction are high. Whether it's money, whether it's a back problem, whether it's just the stress of the job, whether it's I don't see a way out, I don't see a way forward, right? That's most of the hopelessness is I don't see how things can get better, or the economy went to shit, or right, it's always the economy, it's never anything else. It's always like the economy went to shit, my money sucks, right? Like, and then I'm never home, then I'm a bastard to my wife, and like all the other things that come along with that. And I think that like my voice, my purpose, just like yours, is going to like evolve and change where, it's always to help somebody and always to improve it. And I thought I was going to get necessarily like rich quicker than I have, but it's not like the rich, the money is not the end all, right? It's how many people can we help in the process. And then I thought I was unique in my story, right? And like getting shingles and all this stuff. And it's like, well, the shingles part's unique, but like, we've had guys on here that have like tumors and cancer at 30, like that got high blood pressure and like other medical problems. And to reach those guys and like let them know that they're not alone, right? That there is a way out, that there is a way forward, that people are, rooting for them, that people will help them along the way. That's become a much bigger thing, and like selling isn't even on my radar, but it's always the first question people ask because they see that for like technology companies. They never ask like a construction guy, like, oh, you're going to sell your firm? It's like, it's just a weird thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, you get the highly publicized ones like PlanGrid, right? They sold to Autodesk, was it? Bottom?
Yeah, for like well, just shy of a billion, but
Big
950.
chunk of coin. Yeah, and no, I don't often get asked by people if and when I'm going to sell the company. It's a totally different avenue to look at it. Um, that'd be an interesting question to have to field. I did get asked the other day, not to change the topic too much, but we were talking with some insurance and bonding guys, and I guess my ex business partner, whose namesake is still on the company, had kind of walked through the room. And the first question that these assholes asked me with my door open was, "Hey, when are you going to change the name of the company?" And I'm like, yeah, that's a dick question, man. First of all, he's right there. Second of all, it doesn't matter to me. Like I explained it to him, like I don't plan to. I've spent the last 5 years rebranding the brand that it is, but I don't want to sidetrack too much. Anyways, it was more of an uncomfortable conversation because the dude's literally right there, and they're like, "Well, when are you gonna strip his name off it and redo it?" Like, man, you guys are assholes.
Well, it's ego, right? Because they would do the same thing. They would rip his name off. And so, but that's an ego question, right? Like that's coming from a place of um that's what they would do, but knowing what that's a dumb move, right?
Oh, there's so much value in the brand, right? In the name, in the recognition. And for the record, in case they're listening, my insurance guys aren't assholes, but the bonding guy that was there was quite a prick.
Well,
but
dude, it's like, Kanye changed his name to Ye, right? Or whatever the hell it is. He's still Kanye, right? Like it's fucking Kanye. So like your brand, your name has value, right? If Warren Buffett changed his name to, Billy Bob, it wouldn't have the same, resonance, right? He's Warren Buffett. You could just say Buffett, right? And you one of two things, you're either a parrot head or it's Warren, right? Or Uncle Warren or whatever, right? You could say Uncle Warren and people know who you're talking about. So like that type of brand recognition, you cannot like undo. That is what goodwill is on a balance sheet, right? Like that is something that is not replaceable.
for sure, and especially with a company like mine, where we're very geographically limited, right? We're localized. We operate within a very fixed radius of our little area of influence, and frankly, to change the name would be a really short-sighted maneuver in my mind. Now,
Well,
we're no Warren Buffett, we're no Turner Construction or AUK or any of that shit. However, there is definite brand and name recognition that we've earned and we've grown.
I mean the thing is the same, right? Magnitude is different, but the concept is exactly the same, right? So Warren Buffett and the billions of dollars that he's worth, right? You're talking about $1 million decisions, right? Or $100,000 decisions, or whatever it is in your business. It could be a $10,000 decision that feels like 10 million or a
Right.
billion, right? Like the numbers are relative to where you are in the scale of things. So, like, for some of you out there, like a $5,000 decision in joining like a mastermind or a group or personal development or going to a conference might be more money than it might be all the money you have. That's a very different decision than like Warren, but it's like equal to Warren Buffett buying a company. Like the degree is the same relative to your worth. And I think this is like the other thing that like even I struggle with is like when people talk about, doing the work regardless of, the outcome is like, how do you think about that? Right. How do you think about like what work do you need to actually put in to on the other side of it, what result would you want to realize? So like for example, us doing the podcast, like that's putting in the work, right? Doing the work that, like you said last week, doesn't scale, right? It is inefficient use of time. But in like the result is the magnitude and the ripple effect that we have from our voices, just like you have with your voice, in your community. I'm talking to you, the listener, right? Like you have your circle of influence, even if it's just your wife, your kids, the guys you work with. That is your circle of influence. And the bigger that you make that, the more ripples that you have. But, one ripple is enough.
Well, and that's how you affect real change in an industry, in a country, in the world, is the one pebble at a time, right, thrown into the lake. And if enough people would start doing that and start recognizing their voice and really, using their God-given talents and gifts for the better of the whole, the better of society. I mean, think of think how much better a place we'd be in. We're not going to get into politics. I don't think, but we've never been as divided of a country as we are currently, regardless of what happened yesterday with the elections. I don't really want to go down that hole, but to kind of circle back, like just the power in personal excellence, the power in looking to do good for your fellow man, your fellow neighbor, is so massive, but so few people ever take the time to either think about it, and even fewer take the time to actually do something about it. We talked about assets and liabilities and all of these things. There's so much that the average person can do. Like this podcast is a great example, right? It doesn't cost us shit except for a little bit of time. And it's not like we're a top 10 podcast of the year, right? Let's be real here. But I don't give a shit if we reach one person and change that dude or that woman's outlook on either the industry or life in general or anything for the better. Then all of the time spent sitting next to this microphone is well beyond worth it to me. I don't know. Maybe that's a pie in the sky way to look at it, but we could all do better.
Yeah. So like, man, so this weekend so I was at Arte Live this last weekend, and two of the best speakers in the world, Robert Greene was there, and then a guy that I hadn't heard of, Damon West, in his speech. And two of the things that really hit me, really resonated with me, and I've heard this in Arte before, I've heard it in other places, and there's some things you're like, yeah, I know, right? Well, you really don't, because you haven't put it into action, right? Somebody that knows something and doesn't use it doesn't know. And when you go down that path is, right, personal excellence is the only rebellion, or the personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion. And so what that means is that people are always going to look for you to slip up, right? You to do something wrong, and that be their excuse to do whatever it is that you want to do, right? Like, oh, I saw my leader, my boss, like, oh, he was drinking beers one time, and it might have been the one time in a year that you go out for a beer, but then they use that for the every day for the rest of their lives to say that it's acceptable, right? So, or it's just like when you show up with your family, everybody's drinking and arguing and whatever, but those are the only times they see you during the year. So that is how they see you. And no matter how you live the rest of your life, they see you in that moment, right? So whatever you do in those moments, and like, I am no saint when it comes to this, right? You get around family, everything flows, and then you argue and, whatever else, right? From that. And so, but if you do how you live the rest of your life in those same moments, then they will see you in that way. And that's the part of it. The other part of it is this thing of like invisible progress, right? We won't necessarily know that we changed one person. We're just going to do it assuming that we have. And that's a big difference in being able to do the work and not see any result from it. Even though results might happen, we just don't know, right? We don't know unless somebody tags us in, a post or sharing the show or something they got from it, right? So like those things and showing the people that you follow that you care about through those types of actions is how that they know that they're doing good work, right? It's those testimonials, if you will, that come back and the thank yous. And this is why so much in construction is by not kind of transferring that gratitude, those testimonial videos, those excitements about their new facility or the problem that you solved, right? And only presenting problems to your team that nobody ever feels hope. It's always this invisible progress and no recognition for what they've done that keep them in such a low place. So like those two things go hand in hand, but the longer that you can go without ever receiving recognition for anything that you do, the better off you're going to be. But that is a hard place to live, and you have to find like gratitude and just an okayness, I guess. I'm looking for the word there of like doing the thing that you do and significance and purpose and passion and everything else without ever seeing a dime, a dollar, a praise, a thank you, an attaboy, whatever you need on the other side of that. Like you have to be okay with never having any of it to have the types of impact that you want, right? It's like getting fit and you don't see a six pack in 6 weeks. It's like, well, you were a little fatter than you should have been, right? You didn't work as hard as you should have, right? There's all these things that go into that is you have to keep working until you get the result or just keep working for the sake of work, right? That the process is greater than perfection or results, right?
I love that invisible progress theory, right? And I think it's important to note that it's very different from the entrepreneur or the business owner versus the employee or the entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur or business owner, like you have to be comfortable with that for possibly forever, right? And in the invisible progress and not necessarily seeing the results so fast and not getting the slap on the back or the thank yous. But you got to flip that too when you've got employees and people working for you, because what I've learned anyways is especially what I've learned, in my mind, like I expect people to have the same grit, the same drive, the same determination, the same, 100 to 0 mindset constantly for the business. In reality, that's bullshit. It's a shitty way to look at things because no one else has the skin in the business that I do. No one else wanted or took that leap that I did to put myself in a position I'm in. So, and that's not good or bad. It's not a judgment call, but you gotta, as a business owner, recognize that your employees, while you can deal with the invisible progress and not getting the recognition, your employees need it. They need to see you recognizing them and the rest of your team. They need to have that. This doesn't have to be constant. It doesn't have to be foo-foo or making it soft and gushy, but once in a while, like you got to recognize your people. And as a pre-con guy at my core, I know this very, very well, right? Like the job of an estimator or pre-con manager, whatever you're going to call them, is one of the most thankless jobs that there is out there, right? Because you're in a role where if you get it right and you do your job correctly, you put out a proposal or an estimate that is good and true and is where it's supposed to be. Your company gets a project and then it moves on to construction. Very, very rarely does anyone stop and have a party after you get a contract. Maybe a drink, maybe a toast, but it doesn't really happen that way often because the pace of our lives is so friggin' hectic that it's sign the contract, go, let's build the damn thing. Next, now we got the other one coming in. The flip side of that, as an estimator, if you really shit the bed and do something wrong, the results can be catastrophic. And then you're on the other end of that recognition stick that no one wants to be on. So I'm saying this out loud, but I've lived it. I need to be better at the management side of this story. But it's, people need recognition. They need that pat on the back. They need the whatever, the shot of bourbon in the office at, on a late night, or a gift card when they did something cool or whatever. There's a million ways to handle it and to do it. But you gotta separate those two very definite distinctions in employee versus employer, I guess, at the root of it.
Well, and the other thing in construction, I mean, you're spot on in that is, but the other thing ends up being is there's an 18-month delay no matter what, right? There's a time that, like, being on the design side and then seeing the project through, right? That's 2 years in most cases, right? From what you design to what's built, maybe a year, depending on the project. But like, to see that it worked or didn't, or looks like shit or looks great, like there's a big time delay where most other industries have feedback on a much faster basis, right? Even you take health, like somebody can lose 100 pounds in 100 days, right? Like, because most of that's water weight. If you have that much weight to lose, like you can lose that in 100 days. You can lose that in 6 months for sure. And so for us, we have like these huge time factors. Either it's too tight on time and everybody's beating your ass to get it out the door, or it's like, you're late, or we don't see anything for 6 months and forget about it because we're on to the next project and getting our ass beat to get it out the door for the next thing. Right. And so, like, those time delays and time factors are pretty unique to construction. Shit, I mean, they can build a car in less time than it takes us to put a building together.
Yeah.
So
That's exactly the example I was going to spit out, right? Like, if you build a shitty car, right away, or if you build a winner, right away, within a couple months. And
yeah,
you know,
yeah, they'll kill a few thousand people in a year, if it's wrong.
right. It's just it's a different cycle, and most of the people that listen to us are in and around the construction world in some capacity. But there are some I know that aren't, and it's hard to explain to people, like, the time cost of what we do is so huge, and it goes back to the age old question of, when the plumber shows up at your house to fix your toilet, that your clogged toilet, and he quotes you $100 and you balk at the price. The guy's like, go to hell. You're not paying $100 for me just to plunge your toilet, or to swap out your fixture, whatever it is. You're paying $100 for the years and years of sweat equity that I've put into this, and learning, and all of the tools I've had to buy. And it's such a huge time cycle, regardless of what aspect of our industry you're in. Nothing happens rapidly except for the bad shit.
Yeah, it goes to hell in a handbasket in a hurry. And, there's that side of it, right? It's just the same thing in building a reputation, right? Doing the right things for a long period of time. It sucks. There's so two ways to talk about that. Like, it's just a slog, man. And so, like, this is what I've learned more than anything, is that, like, doing the right thing over a long period of time takes so much time. And one of the best analogies I've heard around this is, like, think of building a bridge. And in building that bridge, you can't cross the bridge until the last brick is laid, right? You can't march across it until everything is in place. And so often with, in construction and building your business and putting all these systems in place, like, so often we're waiting for that last brick to be laid before, the thing works, right? You look at sales and marketing as this big whole, right, or doing proposals and presentations. Well, like, I met with these guys, then I had coffee with them, then I had lunch with them, then, I was able to sponsor a dinner that, took 10 grand to be at, to have an opportunity to, then present to at their next proposal for their next project. And then, we put the proposal together, but I had to learn how to write. I needed to have enough stuff in my portfolio to be able to put and present into that project, right? Which is why you don't change a name, because you have all the portfolio projects on the, backside of it. Then, I had to be able to speak and present and do it in a way that convinced people to buy from me. I just named 15 skills that you have to have to then apply for that next big project. You're not going to build an airport or a hospital on your first go. Like, not going to happen. And so many people want to get to that big project, where in construction, I think it's a little more like realistic and like, look, you're building, houses, or maybe on commercial side, you start with like tenant infills of a restaurant or like these simple little TI projects. Then you move up to new builds of, core and shelf or like that strip mall. And then you do full up builds. Then you're doing, the next thing, and all the way up to where in 5-10 years, now you can do that hospital expansion project. You can't do a ground up rebuild, but in 15 years, you can do a ground up $1 billion project and people will trust you with that. And then they're like, well, great to be an overnight success. It's like, well, dude, come on. But that's progression. I think we forget about like that. It's easy to see in construction, but like, look at that stack of skills, right? That's 15, 20 skills to just put a proposal together, not to mention everything that you learned on all of your portfolio projects as you go along. And I think because of the time constraints and like we forget of who we are because we wake up us every day, that not everybody has these sets of skills. Not everybody can design a building. And you're like, well, yeah, this is easy. Well, it's easy now, but like, remember when you just started and how hard and time consuming and frustrating everything was? Like, you got to give yourself grace on both sides, right? Like, more than you probably think you do, but you're still dumber than, you think you are, right? Like, it's, it's both.
Yes, there are years and years and years of toil and effort that go into this, and you're still just a dumbass at the end of the day, and you still better be striving to learn every day. That's the only way to keep this train moving.
Like, so I read a lot of stuff and a lot of pretty weird shit. If I were to be honest. But one of the books that I was reading is like this really weird physics book. But what they talked about is beginner's mind, which is a really weird thing to talk about in a physics book. And you're like, why would that matter? Well, if you look at most Nobel laureates, granted they don't get awarded it probably until they're 50 or 60. Uh, but most of the people that win like Nobel prizes is from a paper that they wrote or a theory that they created or whatever in their 20s. So, but they, it takes like 20 years for most of the stuff to pan out to then say, hey, you win a Nobel Prize. Very few things like happen under a decade and getting a Nobel. Plus, there's just a lot of cool shit that happens that, you got to award people for. So, and you only get one a year. So, um, but in that, like, when you think about it, why are people in their 20s and 30s the ones that win? And it's typically in their 20s or early 30s. Why are those people the ones that those papers and those ages are the people that get Nobels? Well, they come to it with fresh eyes, right? They come to it with the beginner's mind. They don't know what they don't know. And because they look at things through such a lens, like Robert Greene talked about this in his presentation this weekend, is like the two things that kill leaders or emperors is age, right? And not age from a sense of getting old, but it's in age in the sense of you accumulate all this experience, and so you don't do certain things because you don't do them, right? Like the story goes of the woman that cuts off the end of her pork roast, puts it in the oven. It's like, well, why do you do that? I don't know. It's what my mom did. And then you go ask the mom, well, why do you do that? Well, my pan wasn't big enough to fit the roast in, so I cut the ends off. It's like, well, you got a bigger pan now. Like, it's things like that we stack all this experience of like why we build projects, how we build projects, how we estimate them, why we do it. And we have this long checklist of shit that we always do now because it bit us one time on one project with one thing from one guy that happen to be, rough. And then we take that experience and we stack it into everything else. And there's so many things that we do that have had we go back and look at them through an objective lens of should I actually be doing this today, you would change how you do things. But very rarely do we look at it through a beginner's mind, which is why you should have people around you who are new to things, like new to the industry, which is why the young person in your firm is like, like I always got this because I was the young, ambitious guy, gunslinging, whatever, that got shot down a lot is like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, well, but like, can we look at this? Like, tell me why I'm an idiot versus just like shutting me down. And I think that is a leadership trait that we can be open to and like walking through it because there's probably one piece of their logic that is sound that would change things for you that you just discard wholeheartedly because it's coming from a bad source and for better or worse, that's what it is.
That's a really powerful concept, man. That whole beginner's mind thing. Think of the innovation that's lost because we allow ourselves to be jaded by our past and our history and our previous exploits. Like you do that, humans need to do that to insulate and to protect themselves, right? You touch the stove once and you burn your hand, you don't do it again. You walk into the dark cave at night and you get attacked by the saber-toothed tiger, you don't do it again. But in business, I think we allow ourselves to take, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the bad and the ugly get kind of wrapped up into one pot. And some of the bad's really not so bad, right? In the grand scheme of things, some of the bad you actually learn from, but we force ourselves to stack these things, against future movements, and it's preservation. And I get it, and I do it. I know I do it. You were talking about that, and I was thinking of like, holy shit, I do this every day, but the innovation we're losing or we're missing out on because of that could be immeasurable.
Yeah, I mean, we all have it in something, right? There's something that we do that keeps us like, you can pry my coffee from my cold dead hands, right? Like, is that something that serves me? Probably not, but fuck it. I own that, right? Like I know what I'm doing, but that's looking at it from a like I made a decision and I'm committing to it. And so like, and the same thing goes with like, it could be alcohol, food, right? Does this actually serve me? And then your business, it becomes like fitness is usually the black and white thing that everybody gives the example on. But in your business, like, is the way that you're treating like the intake of clients the way that you should be, right? Is the structure of your contracts the thing that it should be? And a lot of this is boring ass work that really sucks that nobody wants to deal with, but you spend 2 hours to actually go through it and to figure it out. Like, is this the way that we should be designing things? Is this the pathway that we should use in projects to do design reviews and critiques? Is this how we should run our construction and progress meetings? Like, nobody ever asked that question. It's just, this is how these things have been done forever. And will you find something in it? Maybe, but nobody asked the question. And then when a young guy is like, well, why do we do this? And it's like, well, dude, this is how we've always done it and nothing's gone wrong yet. No one will tell you that answer, but that's what they're thinking is like, shut up. You're 20, you don't know shit. Like, sit down, shut up. So, but like this whole concept is like, and to not be afraid to ask the stupid questions, right? Like, so I'll give a weird example. So like I'm new to the whole shooting and pistol world. And so like this is something I talk about. Like I brought up with a ton of people. And in Arte, there's a lot of guys that know a lot about guns. And so, and then have carried for a long time. And I'm like, dude, well, like I'm new to this. Like I have no idea what I'm doing. This shit feels weird. Like I asked you about stuff, and like I asked another guy, like Zach, who's been on the show, like, hey man, like how do you care? Like, how do you do this? How do you carry? Like, what's something that he's like, well, so when you move, this is how you should like end up moving, right? You don't want to squat over because then you're gonna print and all this other stuff. And for any of you that don't carry guns or don't have it concealed or don't do any of that, you're not going to get any of this. But coming at it from a beginner's mind, like this is shit I have no clue about, but I'm not afraid. Like I'm still kind of leery to ask some questions because it's like taboo in some areas to talk about guns. But at the same time, like once I get into the conversation and somebody's like open to having it, then I'm willing to ask those questions that make me look like an idiot. But I'm also like, dude, I don't know shit. Please help me. Right. And that's the mindset that we have to have in a lot of things. Like I'm just having it in this and I'm learning a ton and it's all new and exciting and everything else. But like how many things that have you gone through to where like, oh, this is just what I do because this is how we do it. And you know, this is who I learned from and everything else, where you're not willing to come back and like reassess the situation.
There's a lot of benefit that can come from disrupting things and just having the open mind to do things differently. And whether that takes the less experienced guy asking, you know, what asking questions or asking rudimentary questions and that get you talking and get you, you know, having a conversation and thinking, or various other things, it's all positive. It's all ways to disrupt and change and eventually lead to innovation. And our industry especially is piss poor at innovating and changing. And we've talked about that numerous times. It's a curmudgeony old, you know, that's the blue collar badass, right? Is the crusty old guy who doesn't give a shit about what the new guy has to say. But we're trying to flex that a little bit and change it. And, you know, the example you just brought up with the gun thing, it applies across the board to many different topics and areas of what we do, right? And you just got to have the open mind at the experience level guy, but you got to also, as the less experienced guy, you got to have the stones to put yourself out there and ask what may be a dumb question, right? And you don't know, but it could lead to, now you're learning things you need to learn. You're combining thoughts with other people and you're coming up with different ways to do things. And it's all for the benefit in my mind.
It comes down to just asking why. Like, why do we do this? And not being an asshole when you ask it. Like, I think so many people, especially in construction, can be real dicks when they start to go down this path.
100%.
So, like, we've all done it. You know, I'm probably as guilty as the next guy on that one. But like, why are we doing this? Why is this the pathway that we have taken? Right? Can you, and really the way to phrase that instead of why do we do this is, can you help me understand why this is the path, why this is the way that we do it? I don't quite get it. Because then it puts a lot of the brunt on you and you're not forcefully directing to somebody else. Like, can you help me understand? Which also puts you in like a beta position, basically, where you're making them the alpha in the scenario that you are, you know, master Padawan kind of thing, where they know more than you, so it's helping you to understand why they're doing it. But in the process, you're basically asking why without coming off as an asshole. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned. Or the other way to frame that I've learned, because I was real bad at this, is not only can you help me understand, but like, can you help me understand, or what I'm hearing from you is, and then reiterate that sentence from them, to then again, it's you clarifying what it is and not being pointed, not being terse, not being like blunt with somebody. It's what I'm hearing is, and then reiterate what you hear from them. And that it puts it such in a position of like, it's non-confrontational. Like it's an easy way to go about things. And those two sentences have changed so many outcomes for me that could have like gone very differently once I learned that, right? Like I never got anywhere. And then I swapped that to, can you help me understand? And what I'm hearing is.
That's gold right there. There's the value in this episode. In the last two sentences, you just threw it out there. That's huge.
Yeah, and I think this is probably going to be a format for us moving forward. It's just Matt and Dylan bullshit.
Just riffing on things. I like it.
And we'll leave it in here. Um, with that, guys, like, let us know what you think of the show. Let us know if there's some parts that you really enjoy, appreciate. Um, I like doing this episode. This was fun for me to just riff on random stuff, pull a lot of things that I've learned kind of together, and talk about indirectly some of the things that are going on in the world. So if you like this, go ahead and share it, tag us, please, or email us. Be more than happy to have some further conversations around everything, and just let us know how we're doing.
Absolutely. That's all we're asking for. It's a very, very modest fee, right? Just help us share the show and keep the communication up, and we'll keep doing this.
And that's this episode of the Construction Corner Podcast. Until next time.
You want to record a quick intro and then I'll chop it and stick it at the front?
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner Podcast. I'm Dylan. I'm your host. And guys, so we're basically just going to jump right into it. Matt and I just bullshit the entire time of this episode. There's a lot of gold in here on becoming the best version of yourself, of holding the standard of being personally excellent. And then two phrases that completely changed the way that I view conversations, which is all the way at the end. So you got to listen all the way through the episode. And with that, Matt and Dylan, take it away.